refurbished McEwan Hall, and also the associated meeting rooms constructed beneath Bristow Square. If anybody here today has not yet viewed the hall since its refurbishment, I thoroughly recommend that you take any opportunity you can to do so. To me, the outstanding features are the murals on the ceilings and wall, which the University Secretary and I agreed at a graduation last year had probably been covered in cigarette smoke for all of our time. Not your cigarettes, you know. But people had undoubtedly smoked in the McEwan Hall for a long, long time. But they are now vibrant and colourful and very, very well worthwhile seeing. Our meeting in February took place 2 weeks after the arrival of the new principal, Professor Peter Matheson, and we were delighted to be given the opportunity to welcome Peter and his wife, Tina, to Edinburgh. The principal gives a report on the university to the half-yearly meeting, but it would have been unreasonable to ask Peter to undertake this after 2 weeks in the place. So Charlie Jeffrey made the presentation, and this was followed by the new principal giving us a presentation on his early views of the university and some thoughts on its future development. Two very important motions were passed by the meeting. The first was the appointment of Professor Anne Smythe to the position of Secretary to the General Council. We welcome Anne today to her first half-yearly meeting in that position. Mike Mitchell had stepped down from the position of Secretary after 7 years. After 7 years, I have to say, of magnificent service in the post. We were at a later date able to hold a reception to thank Mike and to make a presentation to him to mark his invaluable service. He's not able to be with us today. I suspect, I shouldn't say, he's probably on the golf course. I didn't say that, and that will not be minuted, Alison. The meeting also passed the motion approving the new appointment process for General Council assessors to the University Court. These had been developed following discussion between the University and the Business Committee as a result of the Higher Education Governance Act, Scotland 2016. However, everyone who was present would agree that all of that was surpassed by the presentation given after lunch by General Council member Mr. John Chalmers. Following graduation, JJ had served with the Royal Marines in Afghanistan and sustained devastating injuries in a bomb blast. His talk was inspiring and will long be remembered by all who heard it. Since that meeting, the Business Committee has met on one occasion. We took a particular interest in the strike action taken in opposition to the proposed changes to the UK University's superannuation scheme, USS, and the principal's response. This presented Peter Matheson with an unenviable challenge within days of his arrival. We were impressed that he dealt with this in an even-handed manner and kept in close touch with our own staff and students by both letters and meetings. He wrote to students offering to reimburse expenses as a result of the action. We were informed that our students were supportive of the staff action despite the disruption they suffered. The principal communicated with both sides nationally and supported the appointment of a national joint expert panel, which is currently reviewing the matter. The dispute is not yet finally resolved, and we will continue to receive reports on developments over the next few months. However, as usual, the majority of our work has taken place at subcommittee level. On March the 8th, Philip Moore's Finance and Services Standing Committee visited the new residences in Holyrood Road and were shown round by Mr. Richard Kington, Director of ACE, Accommodation, Catering and Events. The ACE operation in Edinburgh is the largest in any UK university. The accommodation blocks we saw were impressive, but more student rooms are required, and Mr. Kington plans to increase the stock with another 2,000 beds. I presume you know about that. 2 days ago, Philip's committee saw Professor Andy Kerr, Executive Director of the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation, who gave us a fascinating insight into the university's aim to become a net zero carbon institution by 2040. And the centres work with other, both national and international bodies. Sophie Marshall's Public Affairs Standing Committee met with Grant Spence, Director of Alumni Relations. Development Alumni holds contact details for 80% of our 270,000 alumni. Later this year, they will launch new software which will allow locally based alumni to offer mentoring skills and advice to current undergraduates. We have decided that Grant will meet this committee on a regular basis in the future, since our relationship with DNA is very important. Steve Hillier's Academic Standing Committee met with Tracy Slavin, Deputy University Secretary, and Katrina Castle, Deputy Director of Widening Participation, to discuss widening access. 2 facts from that meeting. The university spends £10 million annually on widening participation. And in 2017, Scottish entrants to undergraduate courses comprised 292 from independent schools and 1,525 from state schools. That figure both surprised and pleased me. Recently, Professor Hillier's committee saw Mr. Andy Shanks, the recently appointed Director of Student Wellbeing, for the 2nd time this session. In my experience, this is the first time that a committee has seen a person twice in one session, and this indicates the importance placed on this subject and the favourable impression Mr. Shanks made to the committee on his first appearance. Mr. Shanks talked of the commitment he had found in all people he had met since coming to the university to make the environment a safer place for staff and students. He explained the proposal to develop a wellbeing centre in Bristol Square. He explained that emergency referrals to the Student Counselling Service are normally seen the same day, and 98% of referrals within 3 weeks. Staff in all schools are being trained in student support. This summer, Mr. Sam Trett and Sir Philip Moore stepped down from the Business Committee, and I thank them both for the time they have given to our work out of their very busy lives. I do have to say, particularly Sir Philip, who lives in Berwick and makes the trip regularly and has made the trip today, and we're very grateful for his commitment to the General Council. I'm delighted to say that we had a very strong response to our recent request for new members, and next session we will be welcoming Aaron Ashton, Candice Donnelly, William Duncan and Ario Santini to our number. I am positive they will find our discussions regarding all aspects of university life stimulating and rewarding. Thank you, Rector.
Thank you. Do any members present have any questions for the convener?
Please.
Yes, gentlemen, there's a microphone coming. If you can just give your name and your year, that would be great. Thanks very much.
There's 2 coming.
2 microphones coming.
Stereo.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter de Venk. I started in 1963 and graduated in 1966, BCom. Fascinated by that figure you gave about the state schools and the independent schools. I don't want to be impertinent, but could you just explain a bit whether this was engineered or whether this was a genuine development?
I cannot, because I don't sit in the admissions committee, and I suspect it was a genuine development, and I hope that the word engineered would not be appropriate. But it was engineered in the sense that the university puts a lot of effort into widening access. In that sense, yes, engineered. But apart from that, I don't think so. But it's a figure that did surprise me. I mean, Edinburgh does have a reputation as an elitist university, and I think that figure just puts that to bed.
Thank you. I think I might have seen another hand towards the back. Did anybody else indicate? No. Okay, just... Is that everybody? Can I thank
Thank
Stuart
you.
for
Thanks.
your report, and can I just have the agreement of the meeting to sort of formally adopt the report? Are you happy with that? Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to hearing from the Secretary to give the dates of the forthcoming General Council meetings and some information around elections probably as well. Thanks, Anne.
Yes, off the record, I want to acknowledge that this meeting is entirely due to Mike Mitchell's inspiration, so the things that are good about it are all credit to Mike. If there are any complaints or criticisms, they're my failing to realise his vision. The future meetings, however, will be my responsibility. The next half-yearly meeting will take place on Saturday, the 16th of February 2019, in the refurbished law school. It will be followed by lunch in the Playfair Library, and any motions for discussion at that meeting should be received in the General Council office by the 21st of November of this year. The following statutory half-yearly meeting will be held on Saturday, the 15th of June 2019, in the McEwen Hall. Any motions for discussion at that meeting should be received in the General Council office by the 27th of March 2019. You might want me to move on to the information about forthcoming elections. There will be an election for 5 members of the Business Committee in February 2019. Nominations on forms which you can get from the General Council office or from our website should be received in the General Council office by the 21st of November of this year.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was, to me, very clear. Has anybody got anything on which they require further clarification? No, thanks very much. Thank you. So I just now have to call for any other competent business. Now, one member indicated an item they wish to raise. Just a microphone here, thank you. Can I just say, just as a little thing, it's not a problem taking items from the floor, but if you do know that you're going to be bringing something up, it's really helpful if you just catch me before the meeting starts so that I also, you know, just am prepared. Thanks. Thank you. On you go.
Linda Hendry, 1971 and 1972. The issue, I'm sorry I didn't raise it earlier, only became apparent a few days ago, and it is that we're not making it obvious that you can come to these meetings without having the lunch or the revolving sessions, neither on the internet nor in the billet. And I only got back to my billet today because I'd been in a different house in a different part of the country. And nowhere does it say in plain letters you can come to the General Council meeting without booking for the lunch and without staying for the other stuff, because some people are very pressed for time on a Saturday with children's football and all sorts of other things. So I just would like it to be made obvious, both in the billet and on the internet, that we're needed for the General Council meeting and not necessarily for the other things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'll just ask Anne to come back in on that.
We have noted the point that you raised. We do need all attendees to register for various reasons, including knowing who's in university premises on a Saturday and that they are indeed General Council members. But your point is taken about people having different arrangements and different parts of the meeting which they wish to attend, and we'll look into how that can be made clearer in future.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. The microphone just here. Margaret.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to add my congratulations to you, rectors, for being elected to this prestigious post. And I realise that very soon you may be the only elected member of the court at the university, so I hope you enjoy your position. I was watching very carefully, because you're obviously a well-known feminist and activist for women's issues, and I do hope you'll be able to take this opportunity to be able to forward some of these things in relation to the university. And I'd like you to know that you have great support from members of the General Council. I know the General Council Secretary and myself, when I was an assessor on the court, were on a committee to try to eliminate the gender pay gap of particularly professors in this university, and to try to help them in their careers, the women in their careers. And we remember that, remember with much affection, and that hope that you'll be able to foster these sorts of ideas. And also I hope that you'll be able to foster the idea of more general childcare facilities for the young researchers at the university, who are beginning both their careers and their relationships and so on, and do desperately need all the support they can get. I don't know if this is the opportunity that you would like to expand on some of your ideas, or you might want to do that at another time. But certainly, I just would like you to know that you have a great deal of support from the General Council in your endeavours. Sorry, I didn't mention I'm BSc 1965.
Thank you, Margaret. Certainly I'll discuss with the Secretary about how best to maybe have some more, longer and open discussion with the General Council, but I'm completely happy to do that, and I appreciate the points that you've raised, and I can be contacted direct as well on the Rector email address, and I've already had some of the points you've raised just by members of staff and by students through that communication, so I'm just looking forward to working with you all, and should be plenty of opportunity for further discussion. Thank you. So if the formal business, I'm going to conclude the formal business of the meeting by inviting Stuart to move the motion for adjournment. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. For the purpose of considering matters which may be transmitted to the General Council by the University Court, or of any other business of a competent nature, the Business Committee be empowered to act on behalf of the General Council, and this meeting be adjourned to a date which has already been fixed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, could invite the chaplain, please, to close the business part of the meeting with a benediction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We ask God's blessing upon us that we may go out from here with wisdom, courage and vision, using our gifts wisely to build a just and compassionate world. Amen.
Thank you. I'm now going to move into the item of the agenda that's entitled Scrolling Through Time. We've got a full programme for you for the rest of the afternoon, to which I know certainly I'm looking forward to that. We're going to start with two presentations to highlight the range of learning resources that are offered in the university. I'm going to start with Gavin McLaughlin, the Chief Information Officer and Librarian to the university, and Gavin's going to give us an overview, the use of technology in contemporary education. Gavin, over to you. Thank you very much.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak in front of the General Council. I'm going to give you a presentation today that's going to talk about lifelong learning, digital learning, and both the use and the threat and disruption of technology in education. So technology is fascinating and absolutely an asset to society. And I would say that as the chief technologist for the university. It's in my very blood. And it's all I've done since I was a little boy. I've always been in IT. However, what I wanted to do is start off with really the dark side of technology and talk a little bit about that first. So many of you will remember the two companies that I've displayed up here, Blockbuster and Netflix. You will remember back to a time when you all walked down the high street and picked up your videos, and Blockbuster was really the Harvard and MIT of the video industry. Absolutely, king of the hill. By far the largest company around. Netflix was a tiny competitor, almost invisible. It operated out of warehouses. But Blockbuster was a campus. It was a brick and mortar based business. And what happened is that technology came along and completely changed the world. Effectively what happened is a brilliant scientist out of the University of Tokyo cracked the problem of transmitting video through compression over the internet. And they did such a good job with this new invention that it it basically changed the industry overnight. And what happened is Blockbuster, of course, as we all know, went out of business. They simply couldn't adapt in time. A real lesson learned in terms of what was going on in that industry. Here's another quick example. This is Kodak. Kodak invented the camera back in 1900. Well, the first mass-produced camera back in 1900. But what most people don't know is they also invented the digital camera in 1975. The very first production digital camera. They took that to the board of Kodak. They presented it as the fantastic internal invention. And the people inside of Kodak who had created this technology knew it was the future. And the board said, no, we won't move forward with that because this is what Kodak does. We produce film. Film is the future, and that's where the business is going to go. And as we all know what happened, along came Canon and Sony, and Kodak has all but disappeared. Another lesson learned in the ability for technology advances to go ahead and disrupt industries. What we see now is a huge acceleration of those kind of examples happening. This shows a list of many different sectors, from software, computers, books, toys, all the way through to grocery stores, and the inroads that e-commerce is making in. You can see that many bookstores have already disappeared off our high streets. You can see Toys R Us, Maplin, and most recently such well-known names as House of Fraser, all disappearing off our high street. So what on earth is going on? What's happening, of course, is that the technology inventions are accelerating, and businesses and the sectors simply can't react quick enough. But one has to react. Now, you might ask yourself as you look across this here, you know, is our sector safe? You don't see higher education on this list yet, and that's because it's far to the left. Only about 1%, a little under 1% of higher education is delivered online today, but that is quickly changing. Now, by the way, that 20% number is something to keep in your mind. There's been a lot of research and analysis done by economists, and what seems to occur in each sector is once you hit 20% of a sector being delivered online, you reach a cliff, and everything accelerates very fast after that, and I mean very fast. And if those businesses aren't already online and ready to grab the steamrolling train, then typically they go out of business. And you can see the sectors in the danger zone right now. That's as of 2017. Those are the sectors that are just about to breach 20%. The jewelry industry, the apparel industry has just gone over, and you're going to see a lot of apparel stores go out of business. That's the general prediction. Footwear, there's something. No one buys their shoes online. Well, actually, there's a huge accelerated trend to buying footwear online. We're not in the danger zone yet, but I do predict higher education will move into that in the relative near future. So let's go ahead and talk about the higher education sector specifically and what really are the risks. So I do believe that there is a wholesale paradigm shift going on, with student expectations changing quite quickly. It is the world of instant gratification, personalization, instant online knowledge and skills. Students expect to grab those skills on a YouTube video or online very quickly. That's how they've grown up, and that's how they expect to learn. Price and value is a real issue for many higher education institutes. What is the value of a higher education degree? There's also consolidation of some very large competitors. You can take a look at some universities, like the University of Pennsylvania, for example, that now has launched over 85 full online degrees and accelerating. So some universities are moving very, very aggressively, most particularly US universities with deep pockets, are moving online quite aggressively. And it's a wealthy business as well. Most interestingly, there is competition from adjacent markets. You'll be aware of the change in legislation here in the UK, which opens up the possibilities for new higher education institutes coming in, including commercial competitors. But we see large online institutes like lynda.com, which offers skills education, edging towards undergraduate and other type education. They're not a degree awarding body yet, but watch this space. And we see large publishers like Pearson's also offering a lot of online education. Again, they're not degree awarding, but watch this space. I think they present considerable threats. In addition, my final point is that we live in an age of unbundling. People don't want to buy an LP record with 15 songs they don't like just to get the one song they do like. People are used to just grabbing the one song they do want. Hence, Spotify and iTunes as big success stories. The same is true for education. Do the students want to go through a giant long degree to get the pieces of knowledge that they really want, or can they just fire off and get those subsets of information that they really want, the real pieces, the nuggets of education that they would like to see? So those are some very interesting, a real change in paradigm and threats. Now, there's some real key emerging technologies that are coming into play. I list a number of them. There's the blockchain technology, most notoriously used in some of the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but actually is a fundamental, huge technological invention. Again, another Japanese scientist in this particular example, absolute genius, and that new technology enables a huge disruption in any industry where you need to go ahead and facilitate trust and you need to hold information, such as holding your higher education degree. And there's already proposals, including one out of the University of Oxford, to use blockchain in a higher education environment. There is the Internet of Things, a vast network of intelligent devices, virtual reality and augmented reality, and of course, artificial intelligence. We really sit in the dawn of AI and machine learning. In addition, in the higher education space, there's some real pedagogy and technological revolutions going on. It is now possible to teach at scale with quality. Before, it simply wasn't. If you were going to scale up to a very large class, either online or in a classroom, you were probably going to have to compromise somewhere on quality. However, technological inventions and other methods of communicating, automated assessment, and things of that nature mean that it's absolutely possible to teach at scale with quality. Automated assessments and e-exams are now a regular occurrence, and the efficiency, should the technology be employed, of assessing individuals in a very fine-tuned manner exists. Artificial intelligence and robots are particularly good at doing repetitive tasks, like assessing exam questions and things of that nature. Lecture recording, which we have on today, is a new technology we brought here to the University of Edinburgh, and we're rolling it out across all 400 lecture theatres and seminar rooms. And that's a fundamental shift. All the lectures are recorded, and our teachers and professors are thinking up new ways to use those recordings, and the students are changing the ways and the behaviors about how they learn, how they can go back and look at lectures, how they go ahead and study for their exams. Learning analytics is a particularly hot area in education. All you have to do is look at something quite similar, such as the Fitbits that many people wear today, be it young or old. A lot of people are assessing their physical health and are very comfortable looking at the data, the daily data that comes from that. And learning analytics is simply a Fitbit, but for what's happening in your education world. And it provides a vast amount of up-to-date data for the personal tutor and the student to go ahead and assess the health of their educational path and to go ahead and intervene. Personalized education, such as adaptive learning, is another fascinating technology that allows us to go ahead and customize the learning path for each student so that they don't have to spend their valuable time learning things they already know or spend time on elements that they don't need to learn to get to the final learning outcome. And that's a technology that is adapting and is evolving quite quickly. And we're moving into a world of anytime learning. We can see that students want to go ahead and learn anytime, anywhere, and not necessarily be constrained by the traditional hours of education and the traditional school year. So where are we in terms of the world? Well, here's two examples of two universities, and again, they're both American universities, and I'm not gobsmacked by U.S. universities. I'm actually Canadian, so there you go. It's a bit of the Scottish English thing, Canada and the U.S. But the University of Illinois and Georgia Tech have moved into, in their respective areas, MBA program and a computer science master, into teaching at scale online. A very interesting story from GIT. They had over 3,000 applicants for 100 physical seats for their computer science degree. And these are qualified applicants. We have a similar problem. We turn away many, many qualified students, and Georgia Tech is doing the same thing. They're turning them away. And so they asked the very logical question that any business would ask: why on earth are we turning away qualified paying customers? We're just turning them away. And the answer is, well, you can't physically put them. There's no place to put them. The lecture theater isn't big enough. So they went to their director of estate, and the director of estate said, in 5 years' time, I can triple the size of the lecture theater from 100 to 300, and you can take 300 of those 3,000 students in. And they said to themselves, that's not good enough. And so they devised an online program with the aim of taking all of those students. And they've done such a good job that last year they brought in 10,000 students for their online master's degree. A huge success story, and that has been replicated by MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and a number of other top U.S. universities as well. University of Pennsylvania is probably one of the biggest players in that space now. So what is the threat around distance learning? Well, the University of Edinburgh has a distance learning program and had a target of reaching 10,000 paid distance learners over the next 5 years, but we only have about 2,600 today. And the way that we teach distance education isn't scalable, and the margins are too thin, because we are teaching distance education using the same pedagogy and methods as we do on campus, with a lot of the same restrictions. We have a lot of small boutique master's courses, and our ambitions in data science, MVM, and other areas aren't simply not being realized. So what is the answer? So I believe the answer really is twofold. The first answer to deal with the threat, the digital threat that is coming to higher education, is for us to go ahead and build a very strong digital education ecosystem, which consists of 5 main components. Blended learning, which is our campus-based courses. However, those campus-based courses are using an increasing amount of digital material when they teach. Our current set of 70 online small master's courses, which offer significant material to us. Our digital skills, so this is non-credit-based learning, and we see an increase in the thirst and the need from our students to learn skills outside their subject area. So they might come and get a degree in chemistry, but they also need to know how to program. But they don't learn programming in the chemistry degree. Often they go online, and we offer a comprehensive set of online programming courses through lynda.com to our students. So this is non-credit-beared learning, and much of it is done online. Our MOOCs are very significant free courses that we offer to the world. We have over 2.5 million MOOC learners worldwide. And then finally, the last area is distance learning at scale, which I'll speak about. And the whole concept of the digital education ecosystem is each component supports the other, and it's as strong as its weakest link. The surplus and the additional revenue that we earn in each area can flow over into the other one, and the educational material that is created for any of these areas can be reused again and again. So the missing component in this digital education ecosystem is this university's ability to teach at scale with quality, particularly using research-led teaching. It does not exist as a capability today, but Charlie Jeffrey and I are leading a very large project called Distance Learning at Scale to create this new capability. And really, that's a very similar capability to what they're already using at Georgia Institute of Technology, MIT, Harvard, and a number of the US universities. But it's very tightly focused on a few key areas, such as data science and the business school. And it's a fundamental change in the way that we think and the way that we teach. It will use a worldwide partner to help us deliver the education online in a very large-scale way, and it will make significant use of technology. It's not necessarily for everyone, and it's not necessarily for every discipline, and it certainly will be some disciplines that will be taught in a more traditional way, and other disciplines that will move quite swiftly into the online world. But I think, I feel very strongly that it's very critical that the university has a capability in this area, because I think it is one of the big shock waves that is hitting currently the higher education world, and the university needs to be prepared and adaptable to have this capability so that it can go ahead and move swiftly as the market changes. In addition, no one really knows the size of the higher education market. We knew it before because we knew roughly from past years how many people in the UK were willing to go ahead and come to a traditional campus-based university. But no one knew how many other people would have come if they could. But they couldn't because they had a job, they had care responsibilities, they simply didn't have enough money to come. But online education breaks that paradigm and allows us to tap into that huge market of additional people from all sorts of walks of life that also want a university degree and a university education. Like I said before, we have over 2.5 million MOOC learners worldwide, and so that's a really massive market of already existing users that we can tap into. This just gives an idea of the platform provider that we're looking at. And really my final point is that we're intending on distance education at scale being a funnel combining with the MOOC program that we already have in place that will allow us to attract a wider body of students from across the world and bring them into our master's degree courses and eventually into our underdegree courses. That's what the American universities are doing. They're using this not only as a tool to earn extra surplus and to have wider impact in terms of their education, but they're using it effectively as a marketing tool and a tool allowing them to go ahead and assess students even before they come to the university. And you can see how the funnel works as students taste our free educational material first. If they think of it as high quality, they might take a less expensive online course. and that might attract them to take either a full online master's or, in fact, come on campus. And we'll have seen that student through the journey. They won't be a new student to us when they come to us. So that's a little bit of the vision for the future in terms of education and digital education, and also a little bit of a vision about where we're going with technology. Thanks very much.
So thank you very much, Gavin. I think maybe take a couple of questions if members have anything they would like to raise. Yeah. Does anybody have a question they would like to bring up? I've got here, at the back first, and then come down to you. Thank you.
Yes, hi.
That's not picking up.
Hello. Okay. Hi there. Hi, Gavin. I'm Brianna Pagotto, General Counsel Business Committee member, and I'm on the Academic Standing Committee. Thank you for that very thorough presentation and very clear business case in terms of where the university is moving from a digital perspective. Business case aside, margins aside, income aside, I'm actually really interested in your perspective as Chief Information Officer on what implications moving into the digital sphere has for the student experience and for the human side of education. I appreciate that these factors are going to have an impact on higher education. Digitization and data are real, but I'm really curious about what this means for education as a whole and what the implications are for us as a university moving forward without kind of the figures and the numbers there. I'm just interested in the wider points there.
Well, I could probably spend hours talking about that particular subject, but it's a really good question. So I think there's a number of really key things here. One of them is I don't think online education is for anyone. I think it is an important alternative, and I believe in the future that any university of any standing will have a sizable online offering and a sizable campus offering, and even, interestingly enough, a mix of the two for some students. And students, informed by their personal tutors, will go ahead and gauge what the best type of education is for them in a particular subject area or a particular area of study. I do think that there is a danger of being too enamored by technology. And there is a growing area of society called the digitally disenfranchised. And that's a very interesting mix of people that is just starting to be studied who simply don't engage online. These are people who don't use online banking, who don't use the internet, sometimes for political reasons, sometimes because they're scared, and sometimes because they simply don't have the capability to go ahead and engage. And we must be very aware whenever we create our education that we are inclusive and either by using campus-based courses or specially prepared online courses that we are able to go ahead and provide education to everyone. So I think that's a very important point as we move forward.
Thank you. So I'm going to take, I think if it's all right with you, I'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then in case they overlap. So yourself, and then Andrea.
Thank you. I'm John Clifford, 1990. I'm very intrigued by the things you've outlined, and of course they're very important. We know that the internet is a very important research tool. It's a way of orientating yourself in a particular field and identifying places to look more closely. But I have to say I'm a little bit concerned by the concept of nuggets of education. That raises the question, really, of what education is. So I'd like to ask you, for me, what is quite a big question, what are universities for?
A very good question.
You should get a plug.
Thank you very much. Brian Smith, 1966, if I remember correctly. I found this presentation fascinating, and I suppose I'm naturally sort of fall to a more conservative way of approaching education. But the thing that I've always been semi-worried about is what one might call a Kodak moment approaching higher education, when one begins to distinguish between the educational and the accrediting function of a university. I mean, university does two things. It educates and it accredits by saying, yes, you've got this qualification, such and such degree, etc. And it does seem to me that the time will come when universities have to, as it were, do the education for accrediting institutions which are not necessarily the university themselves. And that, in a sense, a large number of education institutions will be teaching students cheaply, more expensively, leaving people to fend for themselves, on the understanding that at some point they can submit themselves for examination to the institution. Now, the gist of the question is, how long do you feel that the task of a university as an educational institution, as well as being an accrediting institution, can be held together, and the universities almost hold a monopoly on the accreditation side?
So I'm going to take those two questions together, and then I've seen another couple of hands, and I'm conscious that we've got the potential to discuss this all afternoon, so I'll be kind of curtailing it a little bit because I know we've got other things to do today, but thank you. Take those two just now.
So two very tough questions, and I think they're somewhat related about what are universities for and will we still be accrediting bodies. So I think a lot depends on what our customers want. If I can call them customers as opposed to students. You know, as we move forward, what do students, what do the public want from a university? Do they want the accreditation because it has value to them in terms of giving them better employment and it means something as it always has? Or do they want specific pieces of education? Personally, what I predict is I think that there will be a mix. I think people absolutely will want full degrees. They'll want a master's or an undergraduate or a PhD degree, and I think those hold value and will continue to hold value. But I also think that there are people who want to fast track in a specific area and will want the nuggets of education. They don't want the full data science degree. We've seen that online at MIT and Harvard, where they've broken up their data science degrees, and they've offered PITs. MIT offers just a piece just on blockchain, and I think Harvard offers just a piece just on artificial intelligence with huge take-ups, where students just want that. Now, they might want that because they want that specific piece of information to further their careers, or they're working on that specific area. And so I think we need to think of students in a different way. There is the traditional student going after a degree, but there are also learners looking for specific learning, pieces of learning. And I think as an institution, if we want to thrive in the future, we should be able to should tailor ourselves to both kinds of audiences and being able to offer education to both.
So I think, yes, so thank you very much. I feel continuing discussion. You're Angie, and then Harriet.
Angie Lamb, court member. I suppose I'm quite interested in where what you're talking about mixes in with, say, lifelong learning and city stuff. But my main question really is about access, and particularly those who don't really have access at the moment, and financial backing from whoever.
So I'm going to just also, I'll just bring in, can you bring the microphone down in front? Thanks very much, that's great.
Thanks very much, Harriet Harris. This is following on John's point, actually, and Bishop Brown's, I think, as well, that we've run a series called What's the University For?, which asks really any question that people here want to be asking and thinking about. And we've made a film. We'll be doing a film tour with it and a symposium around it. But it does get it to the heart of those questions of what people want when they come to university and what we think we're doing as a university, and how we communicate those values more widely. And one of the things I was thinking of when you were talking, Gavin, was Thomas Merton saying that what he really liked about his time at Columbia, in contrast to Cambridge, interestingly, because he went to both,
was that he was just allowed to wander around the halls and libraries and soak up whatever was there, which I think is a lovely vision of a university. And so I'm thinking how that works. You can imagine that working digitally as well, and I like that. But it does make me a bit nervous about those nuggets, you know, because education opens the mind. That's what it does all the time, and it leads you out of your whatever your limiting thinking might be, and it continually leads you out. It's a constant process. So we just want to have people immersing themselves, don't we, educationally in what's on offer.
Thank you. So, Gavin, do you want to come back? There's a couple of points there.
Good. So accessibility is a really big issue, and in our distance learning programs, and most particularly our distance learning at scale programs, we are being fully compliant with the new web accessibility and accessibility standards. That's absolutely critical. There are some very, very good standards and very good organizations who are creating those standards to ensure the widest possible access for the widest possible number of disabilities, so that people, particularly who are disabled or finding difficulty dealing with online, can go ahead and get that education. On the question about what the university is for, I absolutely agree, and I think the wonder of being able to come to a university and get the whole rich environment is quite critical. But I do think, and I think that's very important when we're introducing people to the wider education remit, and they have the time to be able to go ahead and do that, devote 3 or 4 years or 2 years of their time to do that. But there is also a group of people, lifelong learners, that just don't have the time to be able to spend days on campus or years of their lives devoted to education because they already have a job and they want to go ahead and get a specific piece of additional knowledge. And not to repeat myself, but I think that we should be in that market as well. I don't think that we should leave that to the commercial providers like Lynda and Pearson's. I think that we should provide that as well, and we should go ahead and make sure that we offer to those students, those part-time students, those short course students, the ability to embrace the richer environment. But if they don't have the time and they simply want to get that chunk of knowledge to go ahead and speed their career or do their project or whatever they do, we can offer that as well. In the same high-quality fashion that we offer all of our other education.
Thank you. I'm going to just take one more question because of the constraints of time, but I know there will be a chance to discuss further informally as we're going on through later, and the General Counsel will be able to pick up on some of the issues raised through other.
Yeah, sorry, that's me again, but thank you for a most fascinating address. I look back to my time at university when I had a tutor called Tom Johnston, and he then became the principal of Heriot-Watt University. Tom, as a tutor, taught me more than almost anything I knew in economics. And, you know, the loss of those kind of relationships, are you going to replace them with robots?
So I meant to say before that question, I think part of the other, unless I may have picked it up wrong, but part of the other question around accessibility was also about the widening access agenda, yes, which I think you did touch on there, about other pressures on other people's time, not being able to be a full-time student, that kind of sits a little bit with that, about how do you mix the two things together. So can you come back on that, just that question there, Gavin, and then we'll move on to the
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll check. So in the widening participation area, again, in our distance learning at scale program, we're also taking a look at what the demographics are. And again, back to what I said before about making sure that we're not disenfranchising everyone. And I think there is a responsibility that an institution like this has to make sure that no one is disenfranchised for education, be it digitally disenfranchised, be they disabled, or be they unable because of money or other reasons to get the education that they so richly deserve. On the question of will robots and personal tutors, the absolute intention of all of our programs, including distance learning at scale, is to have human touch. We will still have personal tutors. We will still have the ability for the students to interact not just with their tutors, but with themselves. They'll be interacting online in many different medias. And the technology, including the video conferencing technology and other technologies, have improved quite dramatically. I'm sure a lot of you use Skype, which enables students from all over the world to go ahead and interact with themselves and with the personal tutors. It is not the intention for the university to go down the path that a number of commercial suppliers and some of the other universities have done about cutting out the personal tutors and the human touch entirely. I think that's a different product, and I would not encourage the university to go down that path. It is possible to offer something completely online with no human intervention, no ability to go ahead and seek human counsel or human help. And I think that's a mistake, and I don't really consider that to be higher education, quite frankly. But it will be a competitor, because price-wise, that will be a much less expensive educational product. So I think that there are some real stresses coming in our future, and it'll be very interesting to see how we deal with those.
So thank you very much, Gavin. I'm sure everybody would like to join in. Lots of information there for future thought and discussion. Can I ask Jeremy Upton to come up now? Thank you. Jeremy's the Director of the Library and University Collections. It's going to take us a rapid run through the library's history and a vision of the future, I understand.
So how much time, because I'm aware that we're a bit pushed at this point.
We've got half an hour, we've got about
25 minutes, fine, great, thank you.
half an hour for this part of the agenda.
Lovely.
And then we're going to go on the tours, which I'm going to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to come here to talk about the library. First of all, to say I'm also a graduate, so I'm Music 1985. So some of the things that I've heard today, obviously very familiar in that. And I think also to say, particularly, you'll see the talk is entitled about the history, but also looking forward. I will take you through a little bit of the background of how we've got to where we are with our university library service and facilities. But absolutely, in terms of what Gavin has been saying, and some of that for us internally is also a little bit frightening. Some of the disruptors which Gavin has pointed to, particularly around about the digital, and particularly around about the more personal, are things which we within a library service have to look at very seriously. There have been plenty of scare stories in my professions that our library is going to exist any time in the future because of the digital going forward. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, I'll be able to persuade you that there are absolutely new opportunities for us, and the fundamentals of what libraries have been, the type of skills we have and what we offer to the institution are still as valid today as they always have been. And actually, there are an awful lot of new, very exciting opportunities for us to contribute to the activity and the activity of the university. So briefly, what I was going to do today is I'll do a little bit on the historical side. Hopefully, for some of you, there'll be some things which are quite familiar, and it'll be good to get feedback on that. I then want to touch on where we are now, what the library, just briefly what the library is now, as a starting point to say what I see as the kind of developments coming forward as we move forward into the future. Where are the areas where we will focus our activity and where we will put our focus to ensure that we are supporting the kind of things which Gavin has outlined as education develops at the university. Before I start, I couldn't help but do a shameless plug for a couple of things which we're involved with at the moment. You'll see, for those of you who are joining us on the tour, that this year, and I'm sure some of you will very much know this, that we're celebrating 50 years of our very fine main library building, built by Sir Basil Spence. And as part of that, we're inviting the community, this former student community, to contribute their memories and to contribute in other ways to our celebration of that history. So as you go around, we have an online space where you can contribute those. We have cards available, so please do engage with the process. We've been running a number of presentations and other activities around about this theme, a small exhibition. And in fact, one of the things is we did re-interview one of the original architects who was on the project, and that's available online if you are interested in the building side of it to take a look at. But please do, you're an obvious audience to ask to contribute to that and share your memories of using the library, if you're hopefully good ones, when you have the opportunity to do that. The other shameless plug is to say that if you do enjoy both the talk and the tour, we do have a Friends organisation. We're always looking for more members to join us, and Joyce Kaplan, who's the chair of the Friends, is here with us today. So please, if you want to know more about that organisation, do speak to her. It produces a publication, The Piper. We have our regular meetings. You have access to talks. You get special access to members of staff. So it is a good, if you are interested in libraries, it's a good organisation to be part of and to learn more about what we do. So that's the end of the plug bit. So I wanted to start off talking a little bit about the history of where we come from. And actually, for me, it was really nice to have an opportunity. I do enjoy these opportunities to go back into our history and reflect myself. And there are a number of themes which, looking at what happened in the past, which are quite familiar to what we're dealing with currently in our activity. So University Library was actually, as I'll refer to in terms of the collections, was in existence before the university in 1580. The first collection came to be the foundation collection of the university in 1580. So it's before the university was founded in 1583, and we always like to remind the university that we were here before they were. So. But it does make the point that at that time, and in the history of the university, clearly a library is absolutely fundamental to what a university is about. And this picture is of the first university library building, which was built on the site of where the current quad is. You can see in this illustration the new quad from the 19th century round about it. And actually, it was the first building built by the town council for the university. So it was the first academic building put up by the town council at that time in, just get my dates right, yeah, back in 1616. So that was seen to be the priority. If you're going to invest, make an early investment in developing a university facility, it should be the library which goes up first. And this building was then later extended in 1642. So it was there to take the collections which were coming in, particularly from students in terms of donations and other benefactors. Interesting enough, I'm sure many of you will be aware that there was a major excavation in the quad quite recently. And as part of that, it was discovered that there was we picked up some items from the original Edinburgh University Press, which was also on that site. So we have a really nice couple of pieces of typeface from that time. So even that is connected into that space. And we're hoping at some time that we can use those as part of an exhibition, because we have books in our collections which were printed using those pieces of typeface. So we can make that really nice connection there. So this was the first building at the heart of the original university, and seen at that time clearly as being very important. Moving on is a space which some of you, or many of you, will be familiar with. I guess some of you have actually used this space as a library facility. I've seen the later pictures when space began to get really tight. You'll see the rows of desks of people studying in there. So this is the Playfair Library, which was constructed in the early part of the 19th century over time and was gradually populated with the collections towards the mid part of the 1820s. And there's some interesting features, again, researching this, which certainly struck a chord with where we are. One of the things they realized at the university at the time is before they could move the collection from the old building to the new, it would be quite handy to have a catalogue. They didn't have a full catalogue at that time. They didn't actually know what they had. And they employed someone at £40 a year to actually create the first 17-volume written catalogue for this before they could move in there. So they knew that in order to get that better service, they needed to make sure they could find what they were actually putting into those spaces. And also, as part of this project, there was a major program of conservation. You're going to see our conservation labs later on today. They realized this stock, for all kinds of reasons, hadn't been perhaps looked after as well as it might have been. And they needed to invest to make sure that it was going to be in a fit state to get better and more use within the facility. And actually, it was David Lang, one of our major donors, benefactors of our library collection, who was given the responsibility for looking after the binding and restoring some of our most precious and treasured items. And interesting enough for me, going back to what I was saying about striking a chord, we're in the process of doing quite major moves of physical collections. And one of the things we realized as we move material into our collection facility out at the Gyle is, before we move our collections, we need to know what we've got to make sure the catalogue records are full, and we need to go through a process of conservation. And I hadn't realized, the guys had realized 200 years before us, actually this is the kind of thing you should be doing. Other things I like about the library building in terms of its status, when it originally went up, the lower part of this, the south side of Old College, was going to be a graduation hall. but the university decided that making it a library space was more important. Just not sure whether they would win that argument in the current climate, but it was quite interesting. It was clearly seen that the status of the library and the importance of the library to the institution at that time, it needed to have this kind of status, space, and facility available to it. The other thing I like, as part of the complex, the building includes a space for the librarian at the, get my direction here, at the Clark Street end of the building. And of course, currently, that's now the offices occupied by our principal. So there's been a slight change in the kind of status side of things at that point. So that was our next library building, which we went through. And this should be a picture which is very familiar to many of you in the room today. So this, at that point in the mid-60s, there was a realization with the growth of the university that it was time to move. We didn't have enough space. We had to move to something bigger. And this is an aerial view. Clearly, I'd only realized myself, taking a bit of time to look at it, that you can still see some of the buildings in front of the McEwen Hall, which were cleared away for Potter Row, still in place, but the library building completed at that time. But it was clear we needed a bigger facility, and so the University commissioned Sir Basil Spence as part of the overall master planning for George Square to construct the building we currently have. And at the time, it was the largest university library building in Europe. Again, gives you some idea how this institution valued and saw the importance of its library facility. I'm also amused that at the time it was, I think, built for roughly 6,000 to 7,000 students, and of course now we have 40,000 students. We still have the same building we're using. But so that building went up and has been quite successful. And one of the things we are lucky enough to have is that we actually have a short film from that time. It's available freely online if any of you haven't seen it, wish to go back, and I'd like to take this opportunity to, hopefully, play a wee clip from it. It was produced by a gentleman called Eric Lucy, who produced quite a lot of innovative films for the university, particularly in the School of Biology, and we have those available for you to view too. But as you see, he had quite a lot of interest in the whole kind of design and the direction of film.
You will be set essays. You will be asked to prepare discussion papers, so that you will need access to many books other than your own set books. You may want to learn something of the history of your new home, Edinburgh. You may want to find maps to plan an outing or an expedition. Perhaps meet a friend. You may want to browse, or you may just want somewhere to work in peace and comfort. This means that you must learn how your library is planned, what it can offer you, and how to use it. If you pick up one of the guides from the main service desk as you go in, you will find that most of the essential information is there. And on each floor, there are prominent "You are here" direction boards. The browsing room on the ground floor is where interesting new acquisitions are placed before they go on to the stacks. And incidentally, together with the coffee room, it is the only room in the library where you may talk and smoke.
One of my favourite lines in the whole film is that, because it just jars so incredibly to where we are now. Hopefully that was familiar to some of you. I have to say, before doing the presentation, I showed this short clip to my daughter, who's currently in third year here at the university, and her comment was, why do all the students at that time dress like middle-aged men with a bad sense of style? Maybe I can ask you that question at the end of the presentation. That building has stood us in really good stead, and in 2005 the university took a decision to do a refurbishment, and that is the current building we have at the moment. It took about 8 years to complete, and that again was a recognition by the university that the world of libraries and what students and academics needed from a library space had moved on. And the refurbishment gave us more space. It opened up the building to become a much brighter and more open space, and particularly again began to pick up on some of the things that Gavin has commented on, a little bit more about the self-service, giving students more choice about the way they can actually study within it in terms of the styles of study which are available to them to take forward. And you'll have a chance to see that space a bit later on today. Now, I mentioned that collections have always been at the heart of what a library is about. And we are very fortunate that over many, many years we have acquired quite significant collections. And this is an illustration of an item from the original foundation collection of the university, which again you'll have an opportunity to see today, from Clement Little, who was a lawyer within Edinburgh at the time and donated his collection to the university to be there and to start off our collections in that way. And we are obviously very grateful that we still have these facilities, these materials, and it gives us a chance now to exploit them in new ways, particularly with digital technologies. And I suppose one of the things which comes out is that the whole process of donation and support from a community like yourselves has been important to us throughout our history. And here you have a page from our first donation book. And again, as I'm sure some of you are aware, that it was part of the process of graduation that you had to give a book to the library when you finished, back in the very early days before you get worried at this point. And that actually quite quickly changed over time. They realized that actually it was better that we have a bit more control over what we can acquire and convert into money. So people were asked to give money to us. But it does make the point that a lot of our richness has come through donation, and particularly through donations from people who've had a very strong and close connections to us as an institution. And just then, so briefly to run through a couple of them. This is an illustration from the William Drummond collection, which is one of our fine early literature collections. Interesting enough, it came into the university before we began to teach literature here in the 18th century. But the fact that we had this rich collection, which contains a number of very early Shakespeare items, and again, there may be opportunities to see those later, meant that when the university took a decision to take on that course of study, we had the resources to do that, and we could do it in a rich way and a very interesting way to support those kind of connections. And then we can't really talk about donations without mentioning the David Lane collection, which is absolutely fabulous. Just because it's so large, there is a very large amount of it yet, which we still haven't been able to fully catalogue. We've only digitized a very small part of it, and it covers everything from manuscripts to printed items and a huge range of material. It's one of the most exciting collections which we have within the library. And I think, to me, it's a kind of collection which never stops giving. So we usually get 1 or 2 news stories out of this collection every year. And we had one last year to do with the jewellery which used to be worn by King James VI. We have an invoice in here which came to light, which was sent to his jeweller to repair his full jewellery set. And that was then picked up as a press story. And also, as a nice piece of research, people were able to connect that then to portraits of the time to see whether we could learn more about these portraits in detail. As I say, it's a really great collection, and another nice thing we've been able to do this is actually get quite a bit of student involvement. We had students involved with a boxing project last year, so they can get that kind of engagement with real material and take it forward. So that's a little bit about how we are, and I guess if you'd asked me, if you'd thought before you came here today and asked me to come and talk about libraries, you'd expect me to be talking about buildings and collections. And so I'm going to put up some figures which kind of reflect where we are in those kind of spaces. So currently, our library, top one there, we get 2.5 million visits a year. What we like to say is that we are the second highest, most visited attraction in Edinburgh after the castle. And that's more than the National Museum of Scotland, by the way. We do remind them of that from time to time. But it makes a very serious point that the building is incredibly popular, even in this age of students who have a more digital approach, a very different approach to their study. And I'll come on to my views as to why perhaps we're seeing those numbers a bit later on. We run about the main library plus 8 sites, and here are some numbers on the volume material. Putting those up, again, reflecting ahead of this talk today, it did make me think, these are the standard kind of numbers we'd put to an audience like this to say what the library's about. What you'll note is it's very collection-based. And going on to Gavin's point about disruption, one of the major changes that we have to now face up to is a lot of our content we purchase is digital, and it is far from unique to us. You could walk into any library almost across the world, and you'll find a very similar range of materials. So one of the cornerstones of what has made us unique and different has changed. And that means has caused us to really reflect and be very careful and more open, I guess, about what we think as to what makes us a unique service. What do we bring? What are the things where we make a difference about that? So one of the fundamental shifts we're facing up to is, although collections, and of course because we have very rich heritage collections here at Edinburgh, it still remains very important to us. But those more general collections where we used to invest huge amounts of resource in cataloguing and purchasing and delivering are actually not so significant in a way in the type of effort we put into them as they used to be in the past. So where are we going? And in some ways, that is quite uneasy. That's the route I came up in my profession. And that's now actually something which isn't such a big area of activity for us. So that is one of the major disruptors for us, and something for us to ponder. So in terms of the future challenges which we're looking at the library space, as I said, libraries really are less so defined by collections. It is true, as I say, if you're a student and you move from one institution to the other, the way we buy our content these days, it's often in very large bundles of content, and you'll find the same if you walk into one place as opposed to the other, because we're all buying the same bundles of material from the same providers, the same kind of access. So you won't see that kind of difference so much anymore. Clearly, one of our major challenges is what do we do in the digital space and how do we respond to the whole issue of digitization. We also, as a university library, one of our major challenges needs to be thinking about some of the things Gavin has pointed about how teaching is changing, and particularly that personalization element, where we're expecting to see more of what's called student-led learning, where the students themselves decide how they will develop their education. So how do we reflect that in a physical space? How do we reflect that in our online facilities? And certainly one of the big challenges for us has been in the past, how do we respond to the research community? Again, one of the stereotypes is we do pretty well with our colleagues in the arts and the humanities, but when you go out to talk to a science academic, they'll say to you, oh yeah, nice to meet you, but I don't use the library anymore. So what is our place for them? That's not true, by the way. Of course, they just don't see the fact that we're working behind the scenes to provide that access. But I've had that conversation tens of times in institutions I've worked for before. So there is a question there for us as to what do we bring into that space, what value can we bring to the research community in this university. And then we also have a role to, as an international university, how do we consider that we respond to that question of global reach, what we do at a global. And one of the things our new principal has been saying quite clearly is he no longer wants to talk about being support services, it's much more about professional services. And in terms of thinking about these changes, that's exactly the way we are looking at it. We recognize we no longer provide stuff and you come and use it when you need to use it. We are much more talking about partnership, working alongside people, developing, thinking about, particularly as an example, what we do in a digital space, working with our colleagues, our academic colleagues, to understand how that can develop, rather than offering something which they may come and take from us. So it's been quite a useful phrase to have out there and help us with that thinking process. So what I thought I'd do is then I'd briefly run through some of the areas where we're beginning to see some new thinking from the library side. And the obvious place to start is to make sure that we use terms from the university strategy to show that we are responding to the challenges that the university has identified for us. So the first one I wanted to look at was the whole question of learning. How will a library look different in terms of the way learning is being thought about in their institution? So one of the things, and I'll say more about that towards the end, is around about redeveloping our library and thinking very carefully about what does a physical library need to look like, which is going to be more flexible, which can deal with students who will be making more use of digital content. What will it need to be? So we've started to ask those kind of questions as we look forward to our next library redevelopment. I'm highlighting a couple of projects which we are now beginning to run also, though, to support the whole question of leadership and learning. One of those you may or may not be surprised to know is in the area of resource lists or reading lists. We currently have a situation where we in the library don't get copies of all the reading lists which are in circulation around the campus, which you won't be surprised to learn makes our life quite difficult. Because we have students who turn up saying, I'm looking for, and we don't know about it. So we have a program running, a nice online platform where it makes it easier for academics to submit those to us. That's the straightforward bit. The more interesting bit for us is that once you have that in a digital space, we can now offer a huge variety of other content which academic educators might want to use. They can link through to digitized versions of our own materials which we may have digitized, so real source materials. So rather than students just hearing about or seeing a poor reproduction, they can link immediately from their resource list to a source material and see it in front of them in high quality. And all kinds of other audio, other types of material become much more easily available to use in an educational environment. The other project I wanted to highlight, and this is one of my favourite, is what we call a makerspace. Some of you may be familiar with these types of spaces, which have begun to appear across a range of libraries, both public and academic libraries, particularly in the US. And we have a small one, and you see the picture here in the University Library on the first floor. And what the makerspace does is it's a space open to anyone to come in and allow them to try out and get used to using a whole range of technologies. So that can be everything from 3D printing to scanning technologies to doing some